You've likely grown up hearing that things will come to pass if the Lord is willing and the creek doesn't rise. It might be something you've heard uttered by a grandparent who wished to let you know that even the best laid plan of man can fail in their fruition. Because of course, sometimes the creek does rise. Man plans and God laughs. Sometime in 1903, the building that housed Clear Branch Baptist Church burned down. Many of that congregation sought to join the assembly of Little Bahaley Baptist Church. Families located on the south side of Bahaley Creek had to brave a swollen creek after hard rains. Would these families that were connected by geography find themselves scattered to Little Bahaley Baptist, or to Union Hall Church, or to the church at Fair River as they tried to work through their faith after a fire? No, they'd step out in confidence and create something new in 1903 under the leadership of the guiding hand of a providential God. They would found Heucks Retreat Baptist Church. The names of those founding families are surnames that are familiar still to us 120 years later. Oberschmidt, Haley, Stepp, Bullock, Smith, Herring, Crawford. The first time they came together, it was under a brush arbor, a rudimentary tangle of vines and branches, shaped into an altar of sorts to give the worshipers a point to gather at. Imagine them for a second in your mind's eye. Wagons and mules and horses were the transportation of the day. There were only 23,000 cars in the entire United States of America during the year of the church's founding. Theodore Teddy Roosevelt was the president of the nation, and the infamous incident of his refusal to shoot a chained-up black bear in the Mississippi Delta took place in 1902. They must have been spread out on blankets along the ground and around the brush arbor together in family units as they sang hymns and listened to the Word of God preached.
When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun.
The first meeting of this new assembly lasted for 3 days. Distances that you today can cover in a matter of minutes, such as the drive from Heucks Retreat to Union Hall Church on Nola Road, were much longer treks for the founding families of this church. So yes, convenience played a part in the formation of Heucks Retreat, but without the divine will of the Creator God, couldn't this little country church have vanished just as quickly as it was formed? Yes. Without a doubt, yes. The church name was taken from the school, which had been located in this area for almost 20 years already in 1903. Calling the church Heucks Retreat helped people easily identify its location, as the school was a well-known spot in the community. The school closed in 1959, but the church remains.
Out here, we'd come around over here and bunch of kids ride, like on the weekends, the evenings, and things. And I went right out the back end with the pool. And when I got right to see the steps, I was wondering would it go up them steps or just that front pool. And well, I didn't know it, but it left tracks up on top of the steps because I didn't get out and go up there, But it left tracks up there, and I didn't. Well, it cost a lot of rigmarole anyway about it. I run up on them steps, but now they talk about I went down the hall and all that, but I didn't. The only reason was the door was locked.
Of course, I was baptized by Brother H.P. Porter. He was here 15 years also. We've had two pastors that were here about 15 years, he and Ken Parvin. And I was baptized his final year here in Furs Mill Creek, and which is called Clear Creek, which is actually the creek that flooded so often that resulted in the church being founded here, because people wanted a local church and not have to go through the hazards of high water to get to church on Sunday. And that was the creek that I was baptized in, and I believe it was 1962.
In much of its first 40 years, Heucks Retreat was served by a variety of different traveling preachers who taught the Word of God at a rotating list of churches. In 1948, for the first time, Heucks Retreat called a full-time pastor to lead the congregation.
We've had numerous different pastors that have come and gone, and each one of them were different, but they were a lot of the same, in that they taught us about what we need to do and how to, not only just about the Bible and things, how we need to use that knowledge that we had and the things we learned and things they taught us in our daily lives, and how we treat people and how we live.
As I grew into teenage years, I guess the strongest influence was to have been Brother Coulter, who singled out 4 of us knotheads and taught us how to sing harmony. And we formed a quartet, and he carried us all over Lincoln County to Baptist churches, Franklin County, Capar County, Walthall County, wherever he might be preaching a revival. He thought it cool to have his quartet sing. So some of my best friends grew out of that quartet that we had. So certainly a memorable experience.
Kind of like we were talking before we started the interview, I remember the old church had swing out windows with big oscillating fans, piano, and an organ. And I can remember Miss Velma Terry playing the organ, and Miss Mary Helen Reynolds playing the piano. Now we have video.
Our facilities are more modern. We've tried to upgrade things and stay relevant, but the message of Christ and His love and the service to others here is still the same.
I would say, especially like the time that like has shaped my salvation the most was like my time in like the children's ministry, like my Sunday school teachers, my mom and Miss Brenda were the GA teachers, and I loved my time in GAs. Like we went to, the time I think that like really shaped my salvation the most was Camp Garraway. It's like a camp I went to with the other GAs, and like the only people like I have to thank for that is my mom and Miss Brenda, because they were our teachers.
I knew when they asked us about this that they were going to ask about sort of our story, because our story was born here, like us and our future family. It started here because our church family is so crucial to that. They're a little devious in that kind of aspect, I guess. They were conniving, but they did it out of love. And they really did love on us throughout the whole process. Like Mr. Tommy Owens hand-painted some bushes with me that had since been gone and needed to be green again. And Mr. David and Mr. Joel came, and they made sure that everything looked like it was supposed to. And the church made a church-wide cleanup crew to make sure everything was clean and ready for both VBS and our wedding. And they just sort of, I don't know, they're just pivotal in our start, and they're going to be pivotal in our end. So they're going to be here.
Yeah.
I guess that's all you can ask for in a church family, is just to be here.
Well, we were involved in missions, basically foreign missions, and of course COVID as a way of kind of making us push that to the side. And I would like to see us pick that back up. Victor and I were pretty involved in our Guatemala missions, and we would like to see that come back, being able to do more of the mission work, be in the mission field.
I think our people, in my opinion, are just so vested in all the different areas of our church that the people are what's made it so attractive to me, and the connectivity that I've had with those groups, even from the older generations, where the older generations are giving back and being a part, especially when you deal with a rural environment like ours, that where you have gaps in youth ministry, you had people fill in, and just the thought that they thought that it was important enough to give up their time to be a minister to us. And so I'm gonna say our people have been really phenomenal in that area.
Miss Courtney Owens with Righteous Rockers. It was our children's choir, and she taught me how to love praising the Lord through my voice, and even doing lots and lots of skits and roles and plays. But it ultimately led to why now I love being in our choir as an adult. Her and Gordon Haley, they really made me confident in that I could use my voice for the Lord here.
Go to sleep, my son. Go and chase your dreams.
Well, what has started underneath a humble brush arbor all the way back in 1903 has blossomed into a local church that has demonstrated and declared the gospel of Jesus Christ in Brookhaven and beyond for 120 years. In that time period, there have been 30 senior pastors that have led Heucks Retreat Baptist Church to do what God has called them to do here in Brookhaven and beyond. All the way back, beginning with a man named W.R. Weber and John M. Mayfield, all the way through the course of history of our church with Ken Kirk and Ken Parvin, and then finally ending with myself, Jonathan Gary. God has used different men all along the way to lead our church to do what God has called us to do and to be who God has called us to be. One of the things I love about thinking about the past is that the past always tells a story. And the story that the past tells is really, I think it's in a lot of ways encompassed in the word history. It's His story, God's story. And as we look back on our past as a church, what we see is God's story of His faithfulness to us as a church family for a very long time. And although we don't live in the past, we do look to the past.
When I look back at the church whenever I first came, I just remember seeing just families. You could see the generations that had grown up in the church, and especially we always sat right back there, and we always had the Wallaces and Owens in front of us, and just seeing that generational growth from the Owens and Wallaces that were my age all the way to their grandparents who were sitting in front of them too. And I just remember it being very welcoming, and always felt like we belonged here, especially because my family had generational input in the church too.
I can't imagine that when W.R. Weber and John Mayfield came down from Mississippi College all the way back in 1903 and 1904, that they would have imagined that there would be multi-million-dollar facilities sitting on this property, or there would be nearly 30 acres of land that had been donated to the church over the course of many years. I don't imagine that they would have thought anything other than, well, it seems like God is leading a group of people right outside of Brookhaven, Mississippi, in a little community called Heucks, across the street from a school called Heucks Retreat School. And it seems like that God is calling them to plant this church, and we'll see what happens. And so they took the step. And then all along the way, each pastor as they came led the church to take the next right step. And as they've taken those steps, the accumulation of them all have led to who we are today, that we are a church that has indeed always been about making the gospel of Jesus known in Brookhaven and far beyond. And that's who we want to continue to be. As we consider what God is calling us to do right here in this moment, we want to be faithful to take our next right step, because that's what God calls us to do, and it's who He calls us to be. And as we do that, I think over the course of the next 120 years, we'll be shocked at each step along the way of what all God has done in us and through us as a church family right here in Brookhaven and beyond.
Little Bahaley Creek begins as a stream fed by other smaller branches as it winds through Lincoln County. Then it feeds into the larger Big Bahaley Creek that later feeds into the Pearl River, which leads to the Gulf of Mexico. Just as a trickle from a small stream in northern Lincoln County will one day find itself to the greater waters that cover the earth, so it is with the story of Heucks Retreat Baptist Church over the last 120 years. In Habakkuk 2:14 it says, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord's glory as the water covers the sea." Starting right here in Brookhaven, but going far beyond.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy, never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise to thee an altar, hither by thy help I'm come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace